Another first encounter which confirms this hypothesis is that with Bozo, the tramp from down and out in Paris and London. If Bozo will stand out thanks to his rare personality later on, he's presented through his bodily features as, I quote, a small, dark, hook-nosed man with a dreadfully deformed leg. It is specified that, I quote, he spoke of his hook nose as Roman and was proud of his resemblance to some Roman emperor. It was Vespasian, I think. Bozo turns an apparently physical imperfection into a rare feature relating himself to a Roman emperor, comparable to his ability to conflate the high and the low, and to turn his life as a down and out into an opportunity to read, to draw, and to learn about stars. Bozo also has the merit of being quite thoroughly described, thanks to his own words, as a serious scraper, and what is especially revelatory is that, unlike in the portrait of his friend Paddy, and as had been the case of Charlie's embedded stories in the first part of the book, it is Bozo's very words which are given pride of place. The narrator then offers to repeat what he said more or less in his own words, acknowledging that Bozo's way of talking is, I quote, very lucid and expressive. The phrase, I quote, he could describe his adventures in words that one remembered, reveals how Bozo participates both in the sharing of a present, and in a production of remembrance of the past and perhaps for the future. It is a part of a paragraph which mentions that Bozo spoke French passively and had read some of Zola's novels, all Shakespeare's plays. Therefore, it appears that the narrator must be, in a way, recognizing the familiar within the strange, thanks to his prior education, and he's in the capacity of noticing that Bozo, I quote, had a gift for phrases. The recurrence of expressions such as he called them and as he said reinforce the legitimacy of Bozo's voice here, and the narrator even goes as far as recognizing his own ignorance on subjects such as astronomy Bozo is particularly fond of. Not only to Bozo, but to the reader. Talking about a particular star, he says, I confess that I did not know which Aldebaran, the star, was. Bozo gradually becomes a figure of exception in the eyes of the persona and the readers, thanks to his unusual life story, perhaps, but first and foremost, thanks to his attitude in life, an optimistic and creative one, which the narrator, in his experience with the down and outs, had never witnessed before, since he says at first that poverty, to a certain extent, kills thought. As the narrator puts it, I quote, he had neither fear nor regret, nor shame, nor self-pity. He had faced his position and made a philosophy of himself. The triple use of the term nor insists on the narrator's reverence before this man, who's free in his mind independently from the hardships of the life he leads. If Bozo is viewed as a potential model, it seems that his radical authority is not denied when stating, for instance, that his life story was, I quote, a curious one, or that a certain thought cheered Bozo, and I do not know why. Still, the recognition that Bozo is a very exceptional man, it's actually the last sentence of the chapter, the empathy, the understanding, the fondness at stake are fulgurating to a certain extent. This scene allots Bozo a privileged position within the array of constructions of figures of alterity which Orwell provides in his early works, and it displays his keen sense of the voices of the other, to use Roger Fowler's expression, and illustrates Orwell's will to give a voice to the voiceless and to seize the extraordinary in the ordinary. By writing about these others, Orwell wrote about potential alter egos, but also about skillfully constructed figures of alterity, which work against the content he believed too many would be indifferent. He believed too many people within the norm felt for those who are marginalized, while still, as numerous other scenes show, avoiding forms of idealization. He thus opens up our gaze in a way and denounces the secrecy which surrounds poverty, destitution, isolation, war, tramping, all being situations which are set aside by being cast at the margins of society's sphere of observation. I mean sphere, not here. As for the early novels, they are also concerned with otherness, But the reflection and alternative provided is presented in more problematic terms, and I'm just going to develop that very briefly. The basic generic opposition between the novels and the documentaries does not seem to fully explain Orwell's trajectory throughout the 1930s, which is marked by the genesis of a quest for the other. Nonetheless, it may appear more obviously in works categorized as documentaries, while being hinted at by figures like Rosemary Waterlow in Keep the Aspidis Replying, and reasserted, if only by Florey's wish and the impossibility, to encounter the Burmese in a colonial framework in Burmese days. This is visible in a series of significant scenes enacting encounters such as the Pew scene, a Burmese dance, that's very important in the book, or the scene in the Chinese man's shop, which he tries and fails, as you know, to share with Elizabeth, who is a perfect representative of the Mem Sahib. I quote, those English women in the East who live in the country without learning a word of its language nor about its culture. Yet it is also undermined by Florey's ability to go from friend of the Burmese to member of the colonial matrix whenever the necessity for it arises. Despite his failure in sharing a time with the other, a time of the other, Florey's renewed attempts mark the presence of a structure in the self which awaits for the other's presence. I quote, l'être humain n'est pas tout simplement être comme une pierre qui tombe quand on la lâche. Dans son être, il est en même temps marqué par l'autre, non pas comme nécessité, mais comme susceptibilité et sensibilité par et pour autrui. This is a quote by Robert Burgrave on a paper on Levinas. Burmese days materializes then interconnections between the impossible desire for the other and the anxiety of the other, indissociable from a fear of disaggregation of the self. Yet the rigidity of the oppressing frames we have mentioned before cannot alone account for the failures of the characters to fully encounter the other and present alteration only in the state of a possibility. This is a quote from Burmese days, a potential. This is a quote, by Levinas. The exceeding narrowness of perspective is not just thematically derided through Florey's and Gordon's presences, Florey's suicide, Gordon's sterile writing, but it seems also to a certain extent to be generically challenged. And this the narrative takes over where the characters left off, as literary strategies visible, for instance, in the Aspidistra, the deriding of Gordon in the scene where he's half drunk, half sober, or in Burmese days, namely the choice to devote the incipit to Bukokin and not Florey, in the recurrence of Burmese expressions, and in the numerous processes of animalization at work. They seem to supply the failure of alteration by distilling some sense of alterity, by hinting in other ways at the special importance of the other and the constant need for negotiating both one's identity and one's society.